Ernest Hemingway in The Sun Also Rises posed the question, how did you go bankrupt? Well, the answer, does anybody know? 2 ways, gradually, then suddenly. This principle applies to most areas in life. You don't ultimately wreck your life in a day. It's a bad decision and then another bad decision and another bad decision until eventually you wake up and you ask yourself, how did I get here? You don't burn out in one night. It's years of saying yes too many times. It's running on empty. It's ignoring the warning signs until your body and your soul eventually say, I'm done. Your marriage doesn't collapse after one fight. It's silence, it's distance, it's phones instead of conversations, it's roommates instead of partners, and then suddenly it's broken. But it also works in the good ways too. You don't build strength after one session at the gym. You don't build trust in one moment. You don't build a life of meaning after one big decision. It's always the small things. The small daily things that oftentimes nobody sees. It's gradually, then suddenly. And the same is true for our walk with Jesus. And over the course of the next few weeks, that's where we're going, to look at how does God work through the gradually, then the suddenly. How we may be going through seasons in life where it doesn't seem like a lot's happening, yet we're going to be reminded that God has the long view, that He works through ordinary people, through ordinary moments to graciously use us as ordinary people to play a role in this much larger story that He is telling. It's the small things that sometimes feel insignificant, and yet really the small things aren't meaningless. And that's what we see in Exodus chapter 1. Exodus chapter 1 picks up the story of God's people about 400 years after Joseph relocates his family and his brothers and his dad, Jacob, Israel, into the land of Egypt. And time goes on, and over time, the kings forget who Joseph and his people were. But what was happening in the meantime was that God was blessing them. Because it says here that the Israelites were exceedingly fruitful. They multiplied greatly. They increased in numbers and became so numerous that the land was filled with them. And as you can imagine, as this group of people, these guests in this land of Egypt, the empire didn't take too kindly to it. And so for the empire, their answer to the problem was, hey, let's oppress them. Let's put them to work. Let's work them really hard, and we're going to get them to do all of our dirty work, so to speak. And yet, as they were oppressed, they continued to multiply and they spread. So much so that the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites, so they treated them even more ruthlessly. But here's the problem, is that wasn't enough. And so the king of Egypt comes to these 2 ladies, these 2 midwives. Their names are Shiphrah and Puah. Ordinary ladies who, outside of what they do, we don't know anything about. And he comes to them and he says, hey, when you serve as a midwife to the Hebrew women, and you see them on the birth stool, if it is a son, kill him. But if it's a daughter, you shall let him live. So now here in Exodus chapter 1, these are the first 2 people that we are actually introduced to. Shiphrah and Puah, 2 midwives who don't have a glamorous job, and yet they have access to what God is up to. They are there in the birthing rooms, and so for them, they have this firsthand access. And so they, the ones that aren't powerful, the ones that don't have status or prestige, are the ones whose names we know. It's a reminder for us that sometimes it's not always the most powerful, the most prominent person in the room that is the one that is doing God's will. And yet here, these 2 ladies are. And so what do? They go back to work. Except this time, as they're in the hidden room, the birthing rooms, when nobody's watching, they do what is right in their hearts. And our text tells us why. It says, However, they feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do. They let the boys live. And so the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and asked them, "Why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live?" The midwives answered, "Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are vigorous, and they give birth before the midwives arrive." And so it's this moment that at some point or another in our lives that it's going to call us. We're going to have to answer the question ourselves, is what do we truly believe about who's in charge? Who gets the final say in my life? Who do I actually answer to? And so for these two women, it was not Pharaoh. Yes, I'm sure that they were afraid of what Pharaoh would do to them, could do to them, and yet the Bible tells us they feared God. It's not this emotional terror that we have from just the fear of what could happen to us, but it's fear that is rooted in love and obedience and honor. And so in their hearts, they had already decided what they were going to do when they headed back into those rooms. Because their love, their appreciation, their respect, their honoring of God far outweighed anything that Pharaoh could do to them. And so here they are. They went back to work and they simply didn't do what Pharaoh told them to do. And I'm sure they were afraid of him, but they were more afraid. They had more love and respect and were more loyal to Yahweh. And I think for us, sometimes that's what faithfulness looks like. Faithfulness doesn't always look like these big moments of Moses standing on the Red Sea and parting it and then walking across on dry land. Those are great moments. However, faithfulness often looks like the decision that's made in the meeting when nobody's watching. The decision to do what is right as opposed to doing what is easy or convenient. It's the choice to tell the truth when lying would actually be much easier. It's praying the prayer again, even though it seems as if nothing is happening and it hasn't been happening. It's these little moments, these small acts of obedience and showing up that God is ultimately working through to tell his much grander story. And that is what happens. Because for Shiphrah and Puah, they probably never saw how their obedience in those hidden rooms impacted the generations to come. But God did. Because even from their moment, another 30 to 40 years pass in which God's people are being oppressed. There's generations of people that are feeling the weight and the oppression of being forced into labor. And yet here they are in that hidden room. It didn't stay there. It became part of this much larger story, a story that God was writing over decades. And it looked as if nothing was happening until one night everything changed. And so as we fast forward to chapter 12, it tells us that during the night Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Up, leave my people, you and the Israelites. Go worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and your herds as you have said, and go, and also bless me." It's this moment that has been years, decades, centuries in the making. And I want us to put that into context for a second. So I need your help here to make sure everyone's paying attention and with me. I'm going to tell you how many generations it is. Are you ready? And I need you to count on your fingers with me. Are you ready? Nobody's saying anything. So here we go. I'll do it too with you. But it's your great, 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 great grandparent. That's how long. It's 10 generations of parents passing down the promise of wondering, is this night ever going to come? And yes, for some of that, life wasn't that bad. But for a lot of it, it was life in harsh conditions. It was being told that one day God would deliver them, and yet not seeing the fruit, dying yet again and passing it on to the next generation. And yet here we go. Finally, God makes his move. And it says a little bit later in chapter 12, all of the Lord's divisions left Egypt because the Lord kept vigil that night to bring them out of Egypt. On this night, all of the Israelites are to keep vigil to honor the Lord for generations to come. And so you get this picture, and it's highlighted up here, because the Lord kept vigil that night. Here's what that phrase means. It's this idea of watching, but it's not this haphazard, half in, half snoozing, the occasional check-in. It's not passive in any way. It's as if God was standing watch. He was present. He was a guard on the wall. He was alert. He was ready. He was actively making sure that all of his people made it out. That's what he was doing. He was watching over them, making sure they made it safely. And so for them, suddenly was always coming. They just couldn't always see it. And I think for us, as we look at this story, then that night was being prepared in hidden rooms, and in every act of simple and small obedience, of every generation keeping the memory of Abraham's Yahweh alive. And for us, I think sometimes we might feel like we're in this season of wondering, God, where are you? It's been a long time. Why haven't you shown up yet? What are you doing? I'm losing hope. I'm losing patience. And yet, for us today, it's a reminder that even though it may not seem like God is there, we can rest assured that he's watching over us. He's keeping watch. And so our season of what seems to be silence or absence is evidence that ultimately God is perhaps preparing something that you cannot yet see. And for us, it's a matter of trusting him. Which, as we fast forward, another passage in Scripture that points to this scene is in Hebrews chapter 11. It's known as the Hall of Fame of Faith, and the writer of Hebrews goes through the story of God's people, and it's by faith. It's the cadence, the drumbeat of the chapter, by faith, by faith, by faith. It's not by strategy, it's not by strength, it's not by certainty, but it's by faith. And every link in the chain, every domino in the series plays a part in what God is doing. And it's a domino chain reaction. And it begins not with Moses, but with his parents. It's his parents who hid him for 3 months after he was born. It's scared parents who see their baby boy and they know that they love him. Right? For those of you who have kids, you know that the instant you see your child, you're in love, and you would pretty much do anything for them. And so here they are. They hide him for 3 months, knowing that he's not an ordinary child. And then it's also, they're uncertain of what's going to happen at the end of that. And we know the story. They place him in the river. He goes down, and the rest is history, so to speak. But had it not been for the midwives sparing the sons, had it not been for the parents saving their baby boy, had it not been for Moses, who at some point ultimately walked away from everything. The writer of Hebrews says this, by faith Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith he left, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. Moses walks away from status, from identity, from wealth, from things that people would die for. And yet here he is walking towards something future, something that he cannot yet see, and yet he knows that it is greater than where he is. It's faith. And then it says this, that he kept the Passover and the application of blood so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. Again, it's this promise that God made that had not yet been seen or realized, and yet what does Moses and the people do? They act as if it's already true, which shows us here that the text shows us that the shape of faith is not certainty about what you can see, but it's action taken toward what you cannot. It's faith in the middle. It's faith in the unknown. It's faith in the gradually. And then finally, the moment comes, the Exodus, when people walk through the Red Sea as on dry land. It's the people who just a few weeks later would be building a statue made out of gold and worshiping something else. It's the people who would grumble and complain to the point where even though they walk out of Egypt, they don't get to walk into the promised land. It's a chain in the process. It's a chain in the link in which we see that God uses ordinary, inconsistent, and sometimes faithful people. And God uses every link by faith, by faith, by faith. One life, then another. One act of faith, then another. Like dominoes, each one small on its own, but together creating this something much bigger. It's working towards something bigger. But here's the truth, is that if this was a story about human faithfulness, it would have fallen short. And the reality is that at some point along the way, that domino would have been tipped over and it would have been removed, causing the whole thing to stop. And we know exactly who would have done it. It would have been us. The same people who doubt when it takes too long, who look for shortcuts when it's not going the way that we think it should, the ones who compromise when it costs us something, the ones who needed to be rescued. And so what did God do? God sent us Jesus, not to be another domino in the plan, but to hold the whole thing together. And it's in Hebrews that we see this picture that every moment, the midwives, the parents, Moses, the people walking across was all working toward this moment. They played a gradually role in a much larger suddenly that they didn't know what was going to happen until it did, and his name is Jesus. And Hebrews tells us that for the joy set before him, endured the cross, scorning its shame, and he sat down at the right hand of God. And so the cross looked like the end of the story, and yet it was the hinge, because it was the resurrection that was the suddenly that the whole of human history had been working and building toward. It's the moment that changed everything. And because he endured the cross for you, it means that ultimately it's how the story ends. The gradually always leads somewhere. The hidden room always matters. The long wait is never the end of the story. He endured for you, and because he did, your story doesn't end in waiting. And so for us today, here's what this means for us. Because I think for us, we would like to think that we are the Moses standing on the edge of the Red Sea and being ready to raise our hands and see this miraculous moment of God stepping in. But the reality is that for most of us, we're more like the two midwives, the ones who are doing what God has called us to do, remaining faithful and obedient to him even when it's not easy. And so for us, the reminder today is this, that we are living in the middle of a story that God is already writing, and that most of it will feel ordinary. Most of it will happen in hidden rooms with no audience. Most of it will feel like it isn't adding up to anything. But here's the good news for us, is that none of us, neither you nor I, are the hero holding the story together, but Jesus is. And so where generations failed, he was faithful. Where you doubt and walk away, or your inconsistency, he was steady. He was faithful where you have not been. He endured where you would have quit. And where you have doubted, he trusted the Father all the way to the cross. And now he holds your obedience. He holds your faithfulness in his hands as he is weaving together this much bigger, much more powerful, much more miraculous story. And so for us, sometimes that gets hard, because we look back and we look at all the things that we did do or we could have done, and we wonder, where did I go wrong? Or maybe we're in the middle of a season where you're trying and you're praying and you keep showing up and yet nothing's happening. Or maybe you're on the verge of like a new chapter, a new journey in your life, and you just wonder, God, is this where you're leading me? And you have some confirmation, but you're not fully sure. And yet in all of that, in the uncertainty of life, in the middle and the road that we travel, it's God standing watch, watching over us, taking our ordinary, everyday moments of faithfulness and weaving them together into a story that we may never see to live, that we may never live to see fully, and yet it's God who is working all things together according to His glory and His purposes. And guess what? That is okay. Because for us, God's miracles may seem instantaneous, and yet it's built upon generations of faithfulness and obedience in the small things. And how cool is it that God uses us, ordinary people, in ordinary moments to accomplish His miraculous will. And so with that, God's peace and strength be with you today and always. Amen.